Like he said we should tax wokeness. He said we should What does that even? What does that mean?
Your ideal society would then be a one-world government, right?
Yes.
I genuinely don't want some
think
guy in China to be dictating policies in my town.
countries are horrible. Countries have killed so many people.
I never thought I'd have a pleasant conversation with a one-world government anti-authoritarian. That's really special.
I only ever really get into like heated conversations with people if they're like either like the two people who get really mad at me, the two groups of people are liberals and conservatives. Anyone outside of that they don't get mad at me. Like even like crazy like fascist people, they don't get mad at me at all. But liberals get mad at me and conservatives get mad at me. Basically like equally with intensity. Like if I just get like really mad and I'll be like, how could you say that? It doesn't make any sense, blah blah blah, and then they just like say some like weird status quo thing and I'll be like, no, that's clearly wrong for this and this and this reason. And then they'll get really mad.
Yeah,
but
it's weird. I usually talk to people on Omegle, just try to find random people, just put every single ideology in the tags. And yeah, I talk to everyone from all over the spectrum, and yeah, I talked to this Nesbol guy, and he was super chill. Don't get me wrong, he's batshit insane, but he seems like a super chill guy. It's really weird.
Yeah, I talked to a monarchist once. That's another guy I debated. I debated a monarchist. And, you know, and not like the Hoppian type of monarchist, like someone who like wants a monarchy because they want authority of the monarchy, right?
Oh, damn.
Like a socially conservative person who wants, like an American who wants a monarchy. Like that's really rare. Like it doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's weird.
And he just, you know, he just interviewed me basically. I mean, it wasn't really like, and the biggest disagreement we had was like, he was like, well, you know, I believe that, you know, there are certain moral things that like God commands us to do. So like we need authority. Like he said we should tax wokeness. He said we should tax. What does that even? What does that mean?
I have no idea. Damn, usually I've seen like ANCAPs be very religious, where they're like, you know, God says no authority and that kind of stuff. So, you know, everyone has to follow the commandments, even the fucking state. So it's not legitimate and stuff like that. But yeah.
Are you saying you've seen ANCOMs be really religious?
No, ANCAPs.
Oh yeah, ANCAPs are pretty
ANCAPs are usually
religious.
Atheists. I don't know.
Yeah, some of them are religious though.
They are?
Yeah.
For me, it's super rare.
Some of them are, but some of them aren't. But yeah, a lot of ANCAPs. I'm a pantheist, but I mean technically I'm also an atheist, but I'm also a pantheist, which is more important.
Wait, so how does that? Isn't pantheism like pan means many of something, right? Or what does that mean?
No, it means that I think that the universe is the closest thing that exists to a god, and I think that we should understand that, and we should understand the power of that the universe has. Like we should respect that. Also, I call myself a pantheist because I take the position that in modern society, in modern American society, going around saying I'm an atheist makes everything that you're saying unintelligible to the public. And so if I say I'm a pantheist, at least people will listen to me.
So it's like a pragmatical label.
It is, but I do think that I am a pantheist because I think that everything reduces down to pure experience, which is all powerful and totally causal. And yes, that pure experience is later deduced to be material. But then we just get naturalistic pantheism, which the material is all powerful. All right, and I would just say, okay, that's God then.
Wait, sorry, you know? Can you repeat that?
Everything reduces down at its base to pure phenomena. All right. Okay. a pure infinite phenomena that is causal to everything. And later we form a model of understanding to come to the conclusion that that is in fact material and itself causal. But that just gets us naturalistic pantheism, right? That's what I'm saying.
I gotta be real with you.
That makes sense.
Half of these words just went over my head. Okay, I have no idea what you're talking
Okay,
about.
so pure phenomena, that's experience,
Mhm.
right? That's just I touch things and I feel them. And the important thing is that I feel the feeling. I don't feel the thing. The thing is unknown because that's what Kant says. Kant figures out that you can't actually know the things in themselves. You can only know the phenomena. And then later on, Hegel completely rejects the noumena, which is what I do. The noumena would be that the thing in itself at least exists, right? We don't know that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
It could just be all in our minds as well, and it makes no sense talking about that. So that's what I mean when I say everything is pure phenomena. Everything's experience, basal, right? At the bottom of everything, take everything away, and all you have is pure phenomena, and that's what I mean by that. And because we build all of our models of understanding, which would be like I exist, this joystick exists, my computer exists, and if I drop this bottle cap, it will fall. Those things, models of understanding, are only true if and only if they predict phenomena, right? So everything is built off of phenomena, and also everything is phenomena, and also everything comes from phenomena. Everything comes from other things. We can therefore conclude that this thing, the substrate of existence, is the most powerful thing. It is also everything. It is also, in a sense, infinite, but that's something we can talk about later. But it is definitely all powerful in any context where all has meaning.
What do you mean by
Right.
all powerful?
Everything which is a thing is determinate, is of them, right? It is of this thing, and it exists only as being of that thing. So without that thing, it wouldn't exist. Therefore, what is causal to it, what causes it, has the power to cause it. And if everything is phenomena, then phenomena is required for everything, and therefore phenomena is all powerful because it's causal to everything. Now, the model of understanding says that the pure phenomena is not ideal; it's material, right? But that just makes that material, right? Material is all powerful. Then, material is determines everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like a really roundabout way of saying we just haven't debunked Sopsism yet, and we probably never will. So, sure.
No, I mean the problem of Sopsism is it demonstrates the fundamental problem of knowing the thing in and of itself. Sorry, I have hiccups. But yeah, if there's a thing that exists, we only know the phenomena of that thing. We don't know the thing in itself. And then to say anything above that, like to say we know gravity exists, or we know that if one thing hits another thing, then it transfers energy or something like that, is to infer some model that we made up. We made up the model. And that model is true only in the context of predicting phenomena, right?
Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Sure. I can't disagree with any of this.
Right, but you probably want to go into talking about the morals in relation to this.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm curious about. how do you get to your moral system, and what particularly is weird? I don't know how you quantify or qualify the maximization of wills and wills themselves. I don't really understand this.
Yeah, well, the will is just a placement of what is inside me, my consciousness, onto other beings, right? And I can go through a process of recognition of the will of another. But my moral theory is actually just like kind of a purely descriptive thing, because what it does is it says, given I exist and given I have desires, right? And given I want to actualize those desires, which definitionally that's kind of what a desire is, I'm going to engage in certain activities, right? Like, for example, I talk about this in my presentation that I did on my moral theory, where at the top we have pure phenomena, right? It's like a little eye in a triangle, Illuminati. But it's we experience a direct desire, right? That's pure phenomena, right? You and I would agree with that, right? That's the desire itself is a pure phenomena, and I say the desire gives us the moral claims. The desire gives us the odd claims. That's my proposition. That's my claim. And it seems to be true. So that's egoism. And what I do with that then is I take that and I say, well, what does that mean? Well, me as a person, I have a lot of desires. Let's place me in nature. Let's place the subject in the external world. And then the desires transform. It's a very interesting thing. When you take someone and you put them in an environment that does not provide to their every desire, their desires actually change, right? So instead of saying, I use this example in my presentation, I want cake, right? For example, if there's no ability to make cake, they will instead say, I want cookies. So if there's cookies and not cake, they'll want cookies. And instead, they will have no actualization, no potentiality to actualize their will of having cake, right? And the only relevant will be that in having cookies, right? Does that make sense? And so that's kind of a transformative process of the will given an environment.
Sure. So you're saying that to you the only relevant wills are the ones that have the potential of being actualized, right?
Yeah, I say ought implies can, and oughts are desires. So in this environment, you wouldn't say I ought to have cake when it's impossible to have cake. You would instead say I ought to have cookies when it's possible to have cookies, right? And then further, I developed this onward. Now, to clarify on what I just said, a lot of people could object to that and be like, well, why does ought imply can? Why all that stuff? Well, it doesn't really matter because the outcome is the same. I and you, I'm sure, have all kinds of desires that are impossible to achieve, but we don't talk about them because there's no relevance to talk about that. Like, I want $1 million right now, but I'm not going to have that, So maybe I'll settle for, $10 or something. I don't know. And that's the relevant thing. But if we move on to the final layer, it's the subject, the consciousness, which would be me or you or whoever, and nature and society, right? And what I say is society is just another aspect of nature, right? Other people are just another aspect of nature, right? The only difference is we can recognize a will in them. We can recognize that they have subjective experience as well. And by the nature of them having subjective experiences and us existing in a society, there are now more odd claims, more desires that I can't actualize. And let me demonstrate this to you. So, if I want to be in a society for protection, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I choose to associate with the society. But then I instead like kill a bunch of people because that was my desire. I know that when I do that, I will be aggressed upon, right? Because by doing that, I am destroying the reason I joined society by saying it's okay to kill people, by advocating for that, and by doing it, I am destroying the entire reason that I would ever join a society, right? And I'm advocating against the entire reason that I join the society. And so when I engage in the society, I am actually engaging in a cost-benefit analysis internally. And I am coming to the conclusion that I would give up certain subjective actualizations just of myself for a greater actualization of my will in a group. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. I think it
Right.
does.
And so now that we have this society, things can start happening. Where we have unbalances of will actualization, because everyone in the society wants all the benefits of the society with none of the restrictions of the society. But you can only have the benefits, right, with some restrictions. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, and you really need the benefits. They're really scarce. In nature, it's really scarce to get the benefits, which is like food protection, from all crime and all that stuff. Right? Does that make sense? And so what ends up happening is we start from a starting position not of an actual ideal society, but of a corrupt, despotic society, because it's a scarce resource, right? And so what we have is one person with a spear saying, yeah, I'll give you protection, I'll give you rules and laws if you become my slave, and people have to make that deal, and so they submit to this guy who has the means of protecting them. But eventually, over time, what I say is these contradictions of will actualization, which is liberty and autonomy and all these things, work themselves out. So this guy eventually gets overthrown. His populace can't take it anymore because he's exploiting them too much. And so they kill him. And then what do they have? They elect some dude, it's a natural progression. And then eventually you reach a society where people are more free, right? You can see this even in modern day. Like in the Western world, in the year 1940, Black people were discriminated against in America. It was illegal to be gay in much of the Western world. All of these things, but now it's not. And the reason that it's not is because of this type of moral progress. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so what I say in my radical claim is that, in fact, the moral thing is to have the society without any of the disadvantages of the society. And that naturally would entail the maximization of actualization of all preferred subjective wills. And what that means, finally, to answer the question, is just the ability to do as many things as you want to do as an individual, without the ability to force another to do, to not do what they want, to force another to not do what they want, right? The balance of that, right? Where everyone is maximally free. That's all that I mean when I say that. And my radical proposition is that is what society trends towards. And also that's what is moral, right? Because then everyone's maximally happy, right? And everyone has all the benefits of society.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sounds good so far. I don't have any disagreements. I already probably had similar view, just didn't really phrase it the way you would. Probably because I didn't really have the lingo of all this philosophy to put into these words. But yeah, sounds good. Sure.
Yeah, but like some people might say, oh, where does empathy come into this whole thing? You know, obviously people aren't just self-interested, and that's absolutely true. People also innately care about each other, which helps the process along. Because for some reason, everyone could not actualize their wills at all. Like they would suffer absurdly if they didn't like commit murder. Then in society, we would have like National Murder Day, right? Where like you were allowed to murder people. But that's not what happens. That's not what we need to do because we're moral creatures. Now, for some people, they do that, but they're the minority, and because of that, they need to be oppressed for our own maximization of wills, right? They need to be placed away in some type of facility, essentially.
That's
because they've killed people.
True. I mean, that's kind of that's how Hoppians feel about leftists. That's literally their whole psychological framework for thinking about these things. Physically remove the people who are incompatible with the society because they're just gonna fuck everyone over.
Well, they think it should be done like preemptively or something. I don't agree with that. I think that if you offend, then you demonstrate your capacity to offend. So you should then be placed away, but not before then.
Yeah,
like
so
you shouldn't.
It should be a reactive type of thing rather than just assuming.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I guess if you have like a preventative form of justice and you really think that leftism like always leads to like the killing of people, then maybe you could justify that, but it's not true. So I don't understand. Yeah, I don't really agree with that in any case.
It's kind of important that people understand what are the facts about the world before we can start building moral frameworks, because before that you just end up with all sorts of crazy conclusions that are not very good.
Mm-hmm.
So how would
But yeah, I usually tell people my moral system is just a type of egoism, right? That's normally to avoid all of that. I just tell them that.
Okay, so you said that society naturally trends towards a world where
overall
are maximized as
but Marx was wrong about this. Yeah, Marx agreed with this, but he was wrong about how it happens. I think that his idea that it trends directly to leftism is not true. It can also reverse, but it can only reverse up to a point, and then that reversal will be destroyed because of the natural progression of humanity. But like this is why people like Marxists are very confused by fascism and stuff like that. And I think that their models are wrong because they keep on trying to explain fascism in a context of like capitalism. Because in Marx, everything is the mode of production, which is very simplistic. Yes, the mode of production is important. Okay, the mode of production is a big aspect of how the society functions.
Mm-hmm.
But other things are important too, like social attitudes and religious attitudes and the state structure and all that sort of thing. And to discount all of that, I think, is reductive. And to be a materialist does not necessitate to have a dialectical materialist view of this. Does not necessitate that one actually view it all as, oh, the base is just the mode of production. That's it. I think that's silly. The base is also the state too, right? But of course, the Marxist would tell me that the state only exists because of the base of the mode of production, which I think is silly. I think that the mode of production exists because of the state, right? I think they kind of both feed off of each other. But that's me dogging on Marxists. But you know,
Yeah, you put it pretty good. I agree with what you say there. So how would you structure the society if you didn't just take a hands-off approach and said, things will eventually just trend towards this? What should we actually do, like in terms of policy and in terms of activism, in terms of direct action? What can we do? What should we do?
Well, we should move towards a more emancipated society. So this is stuff like advocating for socially libertarian things, something that we both agree upon, and also advocating for things that are institutionally libertarian, so against the state, and also advocating for things that are anti-hierarchical, so things that bring the power to the masses, this would include anti-capitalist things, like advocating for workers to go on strike and make demands and stuff like that, so that eventually we have a type of libertarian leftism, right? Which will ultimately be the end goal, because I think it maximizes actualization of subjective wills. That's my sort of guiding premise, right? Now maybe you disagree with that, but I think even you might agree, because you said you're actually just in favor of some type of synthesism as like an end goal or something.
Yeah,
right?
I want competition in all systems. I want every single person to be able to try out any single system, as much as we can get anything close to that. That's kind of my thing. And I personally have a bias towards market systems. So yeah,
I do too. I like markets,
based.
but I don't like capitalism. Not based, I know.
Markets, not capitalism. But who wrote that book?
Was it Kevin Carson? It might have been him.
I don't know. Maybe, yeah.
I know that Kevin Carson is a big mutualist. It sounds like something he would write. But yeah, that's another big disagreement that we might have. I'm not an anarchist.
Oh yeah, you said you're a statist. Well, you said that you value social libertarianism and anti-hierarchism. So how do you reconcile these two?
Because I think that anarchism is always destructive to its goal of maximizing actualization of subjective wills. Right? If that's my goal, then and that's the goal that, say, a libertarian anarchist would say they agree with, then they're destructive to their own goal by advocating for anarchism. The way that I say this, I've actually had a whole debate on this as well, is because of the way that these decentralized systems would be structured. So, for example, you can either do something like, I would say, an ANCOM model of anarchism, or you could have something like an ANCAP model of anarchism, which kind of mutualists agree with it as well, but also some mutualists agree with the ANCOM model. So what both of these would be is in the ANCOM model, everything's like a direct democracy. If you're affected by the issue, you have a direct say in it, in like a locality or something like that. Or in the other model, you have a private arbitrator, right? You're probably familiar with that concept, right? And basically, my problem with that is that in either system, there is still some national, or there must be an overarching common understanding that has to be reached, because, and there necessarily will be an overarching common understanding that will be reached about certain notions, like the non-aggression principle. It's all fine and dandy, but it's incomplete, and that's the biggest problem with it. What is property? What is, to define aggression, you have to define what it's against. Like, I can destroy my own water bottle, I can smash this or melt it or something. But if I go up to someone else's water bottle and I do that, it's bad, right? So clearly harming things is okay, but there's some line that says I can't harm that thing and or destroy that thing, and that is property. And how is that defined, right? And I would argue that that's defined at a super structural level, right? That's defined at a upper level of society. And in the arbitration model, what happen is I think this is mine, you think this is yours, right? For an example, we go to an arbiter. I have an arbiter that says it's mine, and you have one that says it's yours, because obviously we chose our arbiters. Then they go to a higher level, and at that higher level, there's some consensus reached above me, right? So my choice was overruled. My choice of property was overruled. And in any case, some normative notion of propertyness in the NAP has been universally established, right? You can't disagree with it. And how it's been universally established is not necessarily in the way that maximizes subjective wills. You can't even know that because it's just based off of random market forces and stuff like that. And even if you say something like, oh, well, the two parties will come to some conclusion through some type of mediation, right? The two disagreeing arbiters, still you have the same problem because some normative framework is being established in the scenario. The will of one is being overruled. The property notions of one is being overruled. So I can't essentially just choose to exist in a society where property is one way. One side has to concede that property is not the way that they want it to be.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with the arbiter model. The other model, the ANCOM model, which is everything is direct democracy, is number one, direct democracy on a national level is impossible because of the trilemma of direct democracy, which is something I would encourage anyone to look into. So you have to have local representation and federalism. And federalism has almost the same problem as the ANCAP model, which is these federal delegates aren't necessarily representing the people, right? Because of the problem of hiccups.
It's fine.
Because of the problem of demarcations and voter blocks and associations of voters. The wills of people are being diminished. They're being destroyed in these delegates, and these delegates are the ones making the decisions, not the people. And so it's very similar to the ANCAP model, where the arbiters are the ones making the decisions, not the people who chose them. And it can come to the point where in either system, the actual will of the people, the actual actualization of their subjective will, is diminished, right? That's a possibility in the system, right? And so I conclude, therefore, that some model of a centralized state would be superior to this, right? And when I say centralized state, I don't mean a parliamentary democracy. I don't mean a president. I actually mean some entirely new understanding of a state, some entirely reimagined way that a state could be structured so that it can specifically be more free than these anarchist models. It can specifically solve the problems of these anarchist models. Because when I went into writing my book, Our Possible Worlds, I was an anarchist, right? I was a mutualist, 100%. But as I discovered these problems, and the reason I was a mutualist is because that's 100% better than like everything, right? It's better than like all the currently existing states. But what I realized is there were real problems with anarchism, and that it was hypothetically possible to, if you just acknowledge that some issues need to be solved at a super structural level, on a national level, so to speak, then you could have a system to resolve these conflicts in a more moral manner, in a way that reflects the actual will of the citizens more accurately than anarchism, right? And when I talk about this, I'm not talking about the government is going to like what would I say? Make some like random silly law about things. I'm talking about broad issues like what is property, you know, things that necessarily affect all of us. If the governing principle of a libertarian society is going to be the non-aggression principle, we ought to fill that in with some answer. And that answer necessarily is everyone's business because it affects everyone naturally. It's how and when you're allowed to aggress on people. Does that make sense? Is what I'm saying making sense?
Yeah, I mean, sure, but I still don't understand how you will have this overarching state, but without it having any public choice issues. I don't see how this is superior necessarily to either ANCOM or ANCAP models.
Because it more accurately reflects the wills of all citizens,
Yeah,
and thereby.
How exactly would it do that then?
Now I'm gonna have to explain the entire sentence.
Okay, I'm sorry if I just made you have to recite your entire book or something. I'm sorry, because I just don't understand this. That's all I'm saying.
No, it's so. What's the basic idea of an anarchist society? This is what is so epic about what I was trying to do in my book. The basic idea, the fundamental good idea, is free association, decentralized free association of people into things that reflect their values, their personal values, their personal feelings about things, right? And so what I do is I take this and I say, well, instead of having some imperfect way of resolving disputes between these groups to where some groups are completely ignored, why don't we just have people associate into these groups and then have these groups form a national assembly with no head, no ruling party, and then have these groups issue a national vote, not on persons, but on groups, right? Free associations, you vote for a free association, and you can be in multiple free associations. And so what you end up getting is a way of conflict resolution between ideologies that takes into account the normative positions directly of all society. So the solution is naturally always on the moral side, right? In these issues of dispute. And what I would further go on to say is in any consistent uh, anarchist society, something like this might occur just naturally, right? You have your different provider, your arbiters, different associations, right? These things naturally exist in the anarchist society. They're decentralized, all this. Some big controversial issue occurs, right? You can imagine this happening, right? Some huge earth-shattering issue comes to light, and it questions the normative presumptions of the anarchist society. If we're truly thinking about well-intentioned, well-principled anarchists, what are they going to do? Well, we might imagine that all of these groups get together and say, okay, well, we're gonna come to some conclusion about this, and we're deciding that the best way to do that is to ask everyone what how much power, how much they support each opinion on this matter, right? And so they freely associate into the different opinions, right? And say, vote on the opinions, and then however many votes each opinion block gets gives them a certain amount of seats in like a Congress, and then those seats can vote, and then that passes the resolution on the issue, right? And they might just freely do that of their own accord.
How's that
to solve problems
from representative democracy then?
It's different because there's no head and there's no dilution of will through arbitrary representation. You're represented by your opinions, right? That's the difference. You're represented
what does
by.
that mean?
Because, okay, so it's hard to explain, right?
Okay.
You have you as a citizen in my system can be a member of like all these different interest groups, right? Depending on your personal feelings on matters. Internal to those interest groups, you vote on internal policies because you're a member of them, and they're formed through free association. You may vote for like a leader of your interest group or something, you know. But every so many years, which is agreed upon by everyone, you also vote on a national vote, and you vote not through one person, one vote, but through approval, and you approve of every single association that you approve of, and you don't approve of every single association that you don't approve of, and at the end of the day, all of it is tallied up, and the National Assembly, which is this giant Congress, forms with the amount of seats that each kind of a group gets, being dependent on the proportion of approval that they got by the society, and that thereby gives them a proportional voting power in the assembly, right? And the reason why this is more justified than, say, these anarchist societies is because, number one, it accurately represents the opinions of the individual, unlike the anarchist societies. And number two, it does not dilute or subvert the opinions of the individuals through various modes, such as federalism or representation through persons and not policy. You are directly representing your opinion through free association in the system. That's how it's superior to all other models, even the anarchist ones, even the statist ones.
Wait, so are these votes like non-territorial, or are
they're not territorial at all?
So
they have nothing to do with territory, because that would be that would be bad, that would dilute the
So
that would
how are they?
subvert people.
So like people from all different regions can I just don't like you can
It's like
have
a general election. We already do it in the US all the time, but just this will be for a different end, right? It'll be better because it will be accurately representing opinions and how you want your opinion to be, how much approval an opinion has, right? On a national level, this is what matters because I ultimately hold that these things, right, these superstructural positions about things like where property begins, where property ends, certain national issues like, oh, well, there's I don't know, there's some kind of like environmental spill or something somewhere. What should we do about that? Certain national issues like that, I think require a national solution. And either way, in any system, a national solution will occur, right? That's my position. A national solution will occur in any system, even in an anarchist system. There will be some solution that is on a national level. There will be some consensus reached at a national level. The only difference is that I want that consensus, that thing at a superstructural level, at the top national level, to be the most moral conclusion possible to reach, right? I want that conclusion, that superstructural hegemony, to represent the actualization of the maximization of subjective preferred wills. That's what I want it to represent. And I think that this system is the most accurate way of doing so. And I have ways of checking the system so that it's naturally like a limited minarchist state. Like there are ways that you can do that through like other bodies. And I go into it in the book a little bit, but I've actually evolved beyond the model that I presented in that book a little bit. But the model that I present in the book is a very good model of it. But we could have things like people's vetoes. So like anytime that they pass a resolution, it has to get above a certain amount of votes from the people to actually go into effect. That way, they're naturally incentivized to only vote on important issues, right? And other various means of limiting the power of this body, right?
Okay, how does this veto function? Like if over 51% says no,
You're
then...
breaking up.
Sorry,
your connection is breaking up.
So I'm right next to
Okay,
the
it's
router.
better now.
Okay,
It's better
thank
now.
God.
It fixed itself.
Yay. Yeah, so wait, what was I gonna ask? Oh fuck, I forgot.
Because this is like our biggest disagreement, right? About a state, right? It's probably like the most defining difference that we have. I mean, I also believe in I'm also a Georgist too, so I believe in a land rent. Yeah.
Okay, so
we probably disagree with that.
I don't know. I didn't really look into Georgism. I think, yeah, I don't really have a position on it yet. So, yeah. But as far as what you said goes, I think I really need to read your book before we can move this conversation any further. Probably, but yeah, I just don't understand. So let me get this straight, okay? You have City 1, City 2, and City 3, okay? And everyone votes on a policy, let's say minimum wage, okay? And people, and let's say over, I don't know, what percentage does there need to be between cities or inside cities themselves? Is it applied to all cities if 51% agree between the cities, or is it applied only in cities where majority people agree?
It's not in cities. Cities find their own policies.
Overall.
It's a superstructural thing above society, and the reason it has to be that way is because there is always some national consensus on certain issues about what should be done. So, for example, I use the most important thing for any libertarian is the non-aggression principle. But we also understand that the non-aggression principle is incomplete because it doesn't have a definition of property. So property is going to be in any system, it's going to be worked out at the superstructural level. And by some method, there will be some consistent ethic of property in the society. That's just what's going to happen, right? And my proposition is that in that decision, I would rather represent all as many wills as possible. I would want to do it, have the decision made in the most moral way possible. And the most moral way possible is this way, where opinions on policy.
So your ideal society would then be a one world government, right?
Yes.
But so if you have like a different country that's, you know, every single fucking person in the country would like there to be, I don't know, a different minimum wage than in the rest of the world. But unfortunately for them, the majority of people on the planet disagree with them. So it's illegal for them to secede. You know, in your system it would be morally preferable.
You want to talk about some issue like minimum wage? This is not about minimum wage.
I mean, either
wage would
policy,
be decided by nations. First of all, what is a nation? A nation isn't a free association of people. It's defined by borders.
Yeah.
So like nobody consents to be born in that society in the first place, right?
Yes, that is true.
And we are born into those rules and have those rules subjugated upon them, right?
Yeah, but I just don't know that some guy on the other side of the planet should have any say about what the minimum wage should be in my town. I think that's kind of silly.
I agree. I think it's silly too.
Okay, so...
But if there's anything that we can agree upon in this matter, it's property rights, because they affect everyone and because a consensus will be reached regardless. Or it will be, or would you rather have it to where one country just decides to have property so that you're a slave, and another country just decides to have socialism, and then they kill each other? No, that's absurd. That's silly.
Yeah, okay, but that isn't really much better if you have like a one world state. Like either way, you could end up with a system.
What do you mean? In one system, they killed each other and they're forced to go to war. Either that, or by some means, some arbitration is done. Okay, those are the two options. Either you declare war on them.
Okay, first of all, I think we agreed that states are made up. Okay, so we've had like I don't know what's the English translation for wars within states. Yeah, but these things
civil war.
Yeah, civil wars. We have those all over the place, right? So you can still have people murder each other if you have a overarching superstructure where everyone democratically tries to maximize wills. I just don't see the world like this, that we can just... Yeah, maybe want to talk about the different policies, or maybe give some different context for me to wrap my head around this, because I don't know.
I think you're objecting because you feel the need to object. I don't think you actually have
I genuinely don't want some guy in China to be dictating policies in my town, in Europe.
So you would rather dictate policies to him?
No, I would rather dictate my own policies on my own personal property, on my own land.
Yeah. But what is property? That's everyone's business.
It's a
you found it right there.
But my house is definitely not property of some guy on the other side of the planet.
You found the issue. You know this is true. Come on. You just said, I want the ability to live in my means on my property. Okay. Yes, that is absolutely what I want too. But what is property? What is that thing? We can have our personal arbiters. We can find those things. And then they go into disagreement. And then they have their own arbiters. Or they have some consensus. Either way, some consensus is being made. That affects everyone. Someone is affecting that guy in China, or that guy in China is in some way affecting you.
Okay, but we're just giving the same argument to each other. We're both saying in either system there can be a violation of wills.
But I'm saying in mine it's more moral because you have more say of all people according to their wills, according to how they would want property to be. And so property is reached, yes, because it's a necessity, but it's reached in the most accurate and most peaceful and most So I got a notification.
Huh?
And most moral way possible. That way, we don't have to have a system where one group of people decide that slavery is okay through their own arbiters, and the other group of people decide that socialism is what we want, and then they secede from each other and build borders, right? And create countries. Because countries are horrible. Countries have killed so many people through doing that.
Okay, fuck it. Okay, fucking EU is gonna join with the US and China, and we're gonna be a fucking one world state, and we're all gonna be, you know, democratically freely associate, and we'll fucking have world peace then. Fuck it, I don't know.
Yeah, but that's... You get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I'm just, you know, I just
You don't
really
want
need
someone
to do a lot of research to.
You don't want someone to raise taxes on you arbitrarily. You don't want someone to hoist some stupid policy about well, you can't wear this on your public property. You don't want that. And I agree 100%. Not even 100%, like a 200%. Right? That's why I think you need to like have this body be bound by some like really rigid constitution and like checked by like a fuck ton of other bodies that are specifically just to check it, right? And it only will do things, it will only pass legislation in these national issues. Like, for example, if this country exists in a world with other countries and those other countries attack us, first of all, now anytime any like a libtard comes up and says, oh well, how does a libertarian society defend itself against attacks, I have an answer, right?
So are you assuming there would be no civil wars, or are you just saying that wars wouldn't be as severe as they are now? Because
Yeah, well, there could still be civil wars in an anarchist society.
Okay, but we only changed definitions. You could still have a population of X fighting a population of Y, even though we're no longer calling
in any
them
system
countries.
you can have that. In any
True.
system you can have that.
Yeah.
But the only difference is that my system would be less likely to engage in that behavior.
What I'm really curious. I really want to understand this because I'm all about mechanisms, right? But when we have democratic systems, we've seen all these public choice problems, all these fucking moral hazards, all these, perverse incentives of people who are supposed to keep people in check, all these fucking people having a good intents, but their policies have bad consequences, and if you don't have anywhere to move to, you're fucked. That's kind of the beauty of competition between systems. You can leave this fucking shithole where I am and go to fucking Switzerland, or if they accept your application.
But you have this notion that somehow these systems can just live in harmony apart from each other. But that isn't even necessarily a moral solution, because if we define it by association, then they naturally come into conflict. And if we define it by region, physical space, then persons are born into them without any consent. And you have the same problem with moderate states being unjustified in that way. And so I really think that the only solution is something like what I'm advocating for. And yes, it could fall into a civil war, right? But an anarchist society could fall into a civil war too. And my system is less likely because people will feel represented at a national level. In national crisis, they'll feel represented. They'll have some official body that represents their view. And I work out all of these perverse incentives, all this stuff. You understand what I'm talking about, where the two-party system exists in the US, and that's just like, that makes the democracy like null and void, like basically, like it doesn't exist.
Okay, but...
So, and I agree with that. I deconstruct that in my book, and I come to the conclusion that you would need this system to remove that. I mean, it doesn't have those incentives at all. And if you worry about populists, like weirdos like that, the entire system is specifically designed to put policy over people. Like, that's the entire incentive of the system itself.
Okay, here's the problem then. I'm sorry, I don't really have the knowledge and the fucking language necessary to explain this properly right now, but I just remember watching a bunch of YouTube videos about it, okay? But even in a multi-party system, you still have things like the median voter theorem, and you still have the same division of voters uh, where yeah, you still have the same problems essentially. It's not inherent to a two-party system, right? We have a
Yeah, you're
multi-party
talking
system
about
here,
like parliamentary versions of this, right? Like obviously the parliament is still a two-party system because it has perverse incentives with its voting structure, right? There's not a country on earth that does this correctly.
okay, but if we look at like I guess you're are you American or where are you from?
I'm American.
Yeah. So if you look at your country, I think the state of sort of discussion about policies and people are fucking insane. It's not that
Yeah.
we are just enslaved by this system. This is just how people behave when we have this type of system. This is just the discussion is fucking nowhere. It's
Well,
bullshit.
I think they're like that because the system's stupid. I think people are stupid because the system's stupid, and they start to think that the system is reality, and so they become stupid themselves. My contention would be that in this system that I propose, people would, instead of being insane, would be more policy orientated, and there wouldn't be this idea of Republican Democrat. That's a byproduct of perverse voting systems with perverse incentives, right? That entire notion of this side, that side, is because of the way we've structured democracy. Like no, no democracy does this correctly. None of them do it correctly, right? Like I don't know of a single democracy that does this right. Like Switzerland, no, even they don't do it correctly. Even they have a like a federal government. Even they have like parties that well, I guess they do kind of have it, but they don't. They have these other systems that kind of eliminate the good features of it. They have like a federal representative. They have a bicameral thing. Okay, yeah, you're probably also familiar with how Switzerland does things, but no country. That's the point that I'm making. No country does what I'm proposing. That's my point. And that's why you see all these problems, right? Like, I mean, and even look at systems where it's kind of like what I'm proposing, like Switzerland. They don't have nearly as many problems as the U.S. does. Okay, I think there's a reason for that. The reason for that is probably because they're not They don't have brain worms because of the political system they live under. And maybe they're a little bit affected by other countries around them and those ideologies, but at least internally they're not affected by that kind of brain rot. So, I mean, and I'm against ruling parties. I'm against that sort of thing. There's no defined leader in the parliament. There's no like head who like sets policy or something. Okay. That's not how the system works. It's not a parliamentary democracy.
So, would you say that if we have your system, okay, and people vote on things that they think are gonna be good, but they end up being shit, but then people assume that it's not because of the things that they did, that it's because of something else, and then they just keep voting for more shit policies, and things just kept getting worse, and you can't leave because the entire planet is in this new superstructure. Is this more morally preferable than, I don't know, just whatever ANCOMs or ANCAPs or anyone else would want?
No, it can fail, and yes, that would be less morally preferable. But ANCOM societies and ANCAP societies can fail, and I would contend that they can fail worse than my system. And the reason they can fail worse is because even when they're functioning properly, they can sometimes fail. When my system's functioning properly, it doesn't do that. When their system's functioning properly, it in fact may create perverse results. That's what I would say.
Okay, then I guess I don't know, that's such a dead end then, because I really need to read your book and really assess what specifically you are advocating for, because right now I don't really know. But yeah, sure. Anything can fail. Yeah. We just disagree on the likelihood and severity of which system's failing, I guess.
Yeah. In either case, anarchism would be preferable to this existing state that we live in. So I just think that naturally either the anarchy would turn into my system, ideally, or would devolve into some kind of state. That's what I think would happen. So, and I outline that in my book, but yeah, we're kind of on a dead end with this.
Like, let's have another one after I read your book, okay?
Yeah. You can tell me how I'm actually a horrible statist after you read my book.
I'll make a debunking series or something.
Yeah, that would be a first. I mean, I would be interested in that. I mean, hey,
no
someone finally read it. Nobody ever reads it.
No such thing as bad publicity.
Exactly true. But yeah, what's another disagreement that we have, really?
I don't know, we can go over specific policies, maybe, like the ones that I don't know, man. It's all a mess in my head, you know.
What do you think about property? I mean, that would be the big. Yeah, that's the big thing.
I'm kind of on board with what you said. I mean, it's a blurry line, and it's we pragmatically can define it in all sorts of ways. We can have all sorts of dispute resolution mechanisms between property. I don't really have an objective moral definition of property, and yeah, that's kind of
yeah. Well, I mean, my objective moral definition of property is whichever property maximizes subjective will. Right. That would be my definition of it. Right. Because property by its nature is an overarching thing. It doesn't work if it's not. I mean, if you and I would agree that it's impossible to have a society where there's like 17 different types of property, right, that exist next to each other, like that can't function. It has to be. This is something that Hoppe says, right? It has to be consistent across the entire. This is like ANCAPs talk about this all the time. The overarching property norm has to be consistent across the whole thing. Now, you can have people voluntarily agreeing to other property relations in other areas, right? But for the property notion to work, it has to be overarching.
Wait, you said you're into defending socialism, right?
Yeah.
So, how's your economics then?
I think that instead of private property and public property, we should have what I call personal property and common property. And personal property is anything that you can own that does not directly affect another. And common property is anything that is owned with direct effect of another. Very broadly, and we can define these things further. So, for example, the threshold of effectiveness. I would say if you use property to detach one from the product of their labor, one, or if you use property to make profit from exchange of use without exchange of ownership, that's two. And these two things we can clearly see involve the direct control of another in your property, and so that becomes necessarily common property. And I would go on to say that this behooves liberty more because and more people necessarily have more control over the area that they occupy, They have more say in their associations, this, that, and the other thing. I think you can clearly see that. And I would also go on to say that it is consistent internally. It doesn't have contradictions because we can clearly define these things, these standards, and we can imagine a legal system of arbitration enforcing according to them, right? And that would be why I would hold that position. And necessarily that results in socialism because we're not having big capitalists like Bezos. You know, we're not having the boss man, you know, boss man bad, so to speak. You know,
Wait, so how would you run
thing.
factories?
Through cooperatives, right? It's a
have
proven model.
Everything
It works.
So
I mean, not necessarily. You could also be self-employed.
Okay, so
right.
The only way you can really be, so you can be self-employed, you can't really hire anyone for wages or what?
Yeah, no, not for wages, because that would be turning the private property into common property. And the way that I see this is, like, for example, I would say something like this. This is what I said to Snake in my conversations with him. In capitalism, the worker associates with capital. The labor associates with capital on the terms of capital, right? In socialism, capital associates with labor on the terms of labor. Secondary interaction, same choice of association, just reverse the power, right? And the reason why this is preferable is because more people who are affected by these relationships have more say, right? And that would naturally tend to maximize actualization of subjective wills, right? And so that's why I conclude that this property ethic is superior to, say, a capitalistic one.
What would you, you said that co-ops are proven to work. I'm kind of skeptical of that claim. Can you enlighten me?
That's not something that you can be skeptical of. They exist and they function.
Well, I know that they exist and function, but I've seen
and
some
they function
studies
well.
saying that they might not be all that jazz, you know.
Well, I've seen some studies that say that they might be all that jazz.
Damn. Okay.
So, I mean, look around you. Like, you can see they work. They don't, like, die. Like, fires don't erupt anytime we try cooperatives. Like, it's...
Yeah, it's not
right.
fire,
And if you have some study that says, oh well, they lower productivity, and if I have some study that says that they make people happier, they actually are more likely to be resilient and blah blah blah, then I mean, we can always default to the fact that they work, they function, and they seem to exist decently. I mean, it's not like, you know, nobody's exploding because they decided to, you know, join a co-op. Like, it's silly.
Sure.
My goodness, they're watching a movie now, very loudly. Oh my goodness.
Damn, dude.
I don't know if you can hear that, but it's like vibrating. No respect for my personal property, I see here. Not violated.
You should sue them for making your eardrums vibrate without your consent.
Exactly. But you get what I'm kind of saying here, right? Maybe.
Sure. Could you send me those studies about co-ops after the...
Yeah. They list the study that I have is actually very good because they list the benefits and the negatives of co-ops.
Okay.
They see both of them. There are benefits, there are negatives, right? That's what I'm saying. That's my position, right? But at the end of the day, my position just rests on the fact that they function and that no one's like bursting into flames when they attempt to do it, and that if you would have a point if like production in co-ops was like so bad, right, that like no society could conceivably function with a co-op economy. But like that is a claim that I think is very devoid from the research that exists right now. Like, I don't think you could look at the research that we have right now and say, oh yeah, society would literally collapse. Like, I don't think that that's supported by any research, right?
But the thing that I'm kind of curious about, because the co-ops that we have today are largely, especially the ones that are successful, are pretty much entirely the ones that are always voluntary within capitalism. So I'm curious, if you had existing capitalist firms and forced them all to convert to being co-ops and have every single workplace ran like this, if that would actually genuinely work, like in these rare cases that we see them. Because
It's work.
when they
We
tried
don't
this in
100%
Venezuela
know.
and Yugoslavia, it was insanely bad. Okay, it was
Well,
dog shit.
Yugoslavia didn't do it right. Okay, I've looked into
Okay. We
Yugoslavia.
just don't know. We just didn't know about
They
your
literally
system.
did it.
Okay, sorry,
No,
man.
they literally did it wrong. Okay, I'm not even no cap about that.
Okay,
Okay,
okay, explain it to me.
they had something called state paternalism. The way they conceptualized means of production was shitty. Okay, they thought that all means of production were like immediately like owned by everyone, but everything is a means of production. And they also negated worker ownership by saying that actually the state can come in and tell the workers what to do. They wouldn't let any of their co-ops fail. First of all, that's a huge problem. They kept bailing them out, which made them go into debt, which made them have to take in loans, and made them have to print money, and gave them inflation, and all of that horrible shit. But even with all that horrible shit, they still performed like way better than like all the other socialist nations, right? They still had more political freedom. They still had more all this stuff. Even though they came out of that system was a result of coming out of a more planned economy, right? It was kind of like a devolution of that. And we can also look to like things like examples like China. Like China kind of does a sort of a socialist market model that is kind of taking elements of markets and elements of socialism and combining them. And they've done extremely well, right, with that economic model.
How does China have elements of socialism? I mean, other than making billionaires disappear occasionally, what specifically do they really do?
Well, because all means of production are owned in common, just like they were in Yugoslavia, and they're allowed to compete with each other. And there's a level of internal, like there's a level of labor has a say, the state has a say, and then capital has a say in this relationship in China. It's a fascistic model. It's fascism, basically, right? It's corporatism, but that model is actually, if you look at the history of that, that is a type of national syndicalism. And syndicalism is a mode by which the workers can assert ownership of the means of production. So I would say that these relationships, these state-owned enterprises, are like sort of semi-cooperatives. They're not capitalist institutions, but they're not fully cooperative institutions, and they're also state-owned enterprises. And I think that we can look at China not as, I don't want to do China. I don't want to do that at all. I think it's silly, but we can look at China and we can say they disregarded the capitalist understanding of what a company needs to be in a society for a market to thrive. And in doing that, their society did not collapse, right? And I'm saying that we can look at that and we can understand from that that doing things in the capitalist way isn't the only way to have a functioning market economy, right? Well, I'm not making the bold claim that this economy that I'm proposing is going to like produce like more wealth than a capitalist economy. I will make the claim that it will put technology to better use. I will make that claim, but I'm not going to claim that it's going to make a bunch of tic tacs and knickknacks, that nobody wants. That's something that capitalism does very well, right?
Yeah. So then, if I understood it correctly, you would essentially have like capitalism, but with only co-ops, right? It was everything, everything else would still be the same.
And self-employed people.
Yeah, and self-employed people. Okay.
And I think it would be, again, we can have a conversation about how that might look, right? That's what I would say. it might look one way, it might look another way, but the overall contention that it would be impossible and the society would collapse, I think, is a very contentious position, and I don't think that that's something we can conclude. Specifically from my model, which is a very libertarian model of this. It's like a free market socialism. So I don't think it would have a lot of the same problems that we see in Yugoslavia, for example.
And Venezuela.
And Venezuela is like a statist, weird, semi-capitalist society. It's I don't think that we can really point to Venezuela as an example of anything, to be honest.
It's its own anarcho-Venezuelism.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, those are my economic positions.
Doesn't sound as bad as I thought it would, you know.
Yeah, I recently rejected the socialist label, even though I am a socialist. I think I need a new name. I need a new name for myself other than socialism, because socialism is when government does stuff, right? So.
Yeah, you're a smart dude. I gotta read your book. Okay, send me your book. Send me the articles.
It's right there.
Okay.
I'll post that as well after we're done with the conversation. If there's anything else that if you have a contention with anything else that I've said.
No, I think I really need to look into this stuff before I can say anything else. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I know. I mean, it's been another productive conversation with a fellow anti-authority enjoyer. You know.
Yeah.
I always have good conversations with them.
I never thought I'd have a pleasant conversation with a one world government anti-authoritarian. That's really special. Okay, well, it's been awesome. Okay, I'll look into this stuff. We definitely gotta do a part 2 where I destroy with facts and logic and things like that.
Yeah, so we'll completely deconstruct my entire. I'll be crying. I'll cry at the end. But yeah, I'll stop the recording.
Yeah,
do the little peace signs before then.
Yeah, of course. Same.
And then stop the recording.